A few nights ago, a few days ago, we had the ordinations of a couple of new Anagarikas, Anagarika Aaron, Anagarika Dave, and the going forth into the novice life, Samanera Yasa, formerly Josh. And during the evening of reflections throughout the ceremonies, Ajahn made a reference or two to my impending retirement. So a few reflections, another one in an endless series of reflections on my retirement, I'm sure, many to come. But as I think many people already know, I'll be relinquishing the position of co-abbot in a few weeks, June 8th to be exact, 5 a.m., with the planned, anyway, departure to go up to the Hermitage for the summer, the Vasa period, and also bringing Tanrakito along for the Vasa to go up there, spend a few months with Ajahn Siddhanta, and that being part of the planned retirement all along. 2 years ago, when Ajahn and I stepped into the roles as Longpa, retired into the role of guiding elder, my commitment was always to be for 2 years to just help with transition, let Ajahn get comfortable with being in more of a administrative / leadership role, and then eventually step back and take a break from administrative duties, leadership duties, and kind of see what evolves for myself in the years to come, hopefully, if I don't die of something sooner. Don't plan to, but who knows. So, another transition in a lifetime. Time to reassess, reevaluate, reconfigure, relinquish. It's kind of what I think about retirement. And looking back over a lifetime, so far anyway, part of a lifetime, seeing all the different kinds of ways that a person establishes identity, takes on roles, defines oneself, how I've defined myself in many different ways over different phases of this particular lifetime. Yeah, when you're very young, at least when I was very young, it didn't seem like there was too much of this identity building. Just kind of did what we wanted to do within certain restrictions imposed upon by parents. Mostly just having fun and going to school in the early years and feeding the senses, experiencing the world as a youngster, as a young person. But as time goes on and the socialization happens and you start to make friends in the neighborhood, things like that, the forms of identity or roles start to coalesce in their own ways, in the ways that kids do. And I remember many people have this kind of experience. You sort of form little groups within the neighborhood. We had a great neighborhood growing up. It was one of the best, and it was a time before people became more isolated we were in family units. Of course, we all had our family units, but it was a real neighborhood, and a lot of us were growing up together in more or less the same age brackets. Me and my brother and my sister, who were both older, but just a whole neighborhood of families and kids all growing up together. So we formed our little groups and societies and clubs and things like this, the way that kids can do, given the opportunity. I remember, I think my first identity or role in a grouping, it was a few of my friends and myself, and I've told this story before, I'm sure some people have heard it, but we formed into a little neighborhood group called the WPA. Woodburn Road was the road that I lived on, Woodburn. It was the Woodburn Protection Agency. It was sort of roughly modeled on the old TV show, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Those of us who were over 60 might remember that show. They had the World Protection Agency, the WPA, and so we were the Woodburn Protection Agency, formed to protect our neighborhood from evil espionage and all these kinds of things that might infiltrate our little enclave. So we had a whole organization and little membership badges, and we patrolled the neighborhood. Me and Charlie and Alex and their dog, their golden retriever dog, Perth. We patrolled the neighborhoods and just make sure that all was going well. But that was kind of like a first memory when I think back of this kind of a group identity and a role, that kind of formation of an identity, a model to hold on to, with establishing some sort of security organization in our lives. And it was lots of fun, of course. And then we grew up, tried on other roles, all the various painful explorations in adolescence, which I don't even want to think about. But all the ways we try to establish identities separate from our families, with groups of peers, all the changes that happen then, and growing into later teenage lives and early adulthood, deciding on a career, and this was a big one, deciding on a career and establishing an identity around training as and being a nurse. And the amount of conscious indoctrination, in a sense, into a particular mindset that involved a very deliberate training to develop not only the skills of being a nurse, but sort of the personality, if you will, the model of the structure, the psychological structure of identifying oneself in that kind of role. Much in the same way that other career training is geared that way, whether it's a doctor or a school teacher or a lawyer. Each comes with its own kind of, not only level of knowledge and skills, but a mindset, becoming of some sort of person with an identity as such. And you can look back over a lifetime and kind of, well, where did those go? Where did the little committee of the Woodburn Protection Agency, where did mine roll? Who was that? Where did he go? Or where did the awkward adolescent go? Memories. Where did the nurse go when I came to the monastery? I was talking with, I think it was Ajahn Karuṇadhammo the other day about an acquaintance who he was noticing had a long list of initials and titles and roles afterwards. We were looking at that and marking on that. And I had a few of those. Where did Tom DeMaria, RNBSNMHA, go to? And I took on this lifestyle of being a monastic. That in itself was a big transition, finding myself disillusioned in a sense, or not feeling like, even though I was really enjoying my work and aspects of my life, sort of like, where is this leading? What is this form of identity? Do I really want to have this self-identity throughout the rest of my life for another 40, 50, 60 years? This was around the age of in my late 30s. Just realizing, gosh, it's just another shoe that doesn't fit quite right. And without going into a long history, it's just the retaking, letting go of those, and letting go of that particular role, that particular form of becoming, and picking up another one in a sense. The role of the monastic is one that's designed to help start letting go of those things, and letting go of those kinds of roles. But there's still an identity that's easy to pick up in picking up the monastic form too. So just reflecting that now, and even during that time, is picking up the identity of Anagarika, Samanera, junior monk, Majjhima monk, senior monk, Ajahn co-abbot, Ajahn, and now relinquishing that particular title, and as Ajahn Karuṇadhammo leaked out in the talk the other night, kind of my tongue-in-cheek new identity of non-guiding elder. But also thinking this is a really good opportunity, these transitions are a really good opportunity to just start dropping any form of further identification, further becoming. This is a great opportunity to be able to look back and say, oh, who was that? Who is this? Is there a need to become anything else? So, in the realm of the Buddhist teachings on becoming, Bhava, I thought I've been thinking about this actually for a few weeks now, and looking around in the teachings, the suttas, just for descriptions of this process, and rediscovered another sutta. I don't usually do a lot of reading of suttas during a discourse, but this is a short one, and I thought, gee, rather than my trying to paraphrase it, it's just so beautiful in the Buddha's words, or the translation of the Buddha's words anyway. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll just read it, because I couldn't do justice trying to paraphrase it in my own words. And it's not too long. So this is from the Udana 3.1. It's called the Loka Sutta, Surveying the World. This translation is mostly Ajahn Thanissaro Bhikkhu, with a few changes, taking some from John Ireland's translation, and just a few other little small modifications that seem to flow better for myself. I have heard that on one occasion, the Blessed One was staying at Uruvela on the bank of the Naranjara River, at the root of the Bodhi tree, the tree of awakening, newly awakened. And on that occasion, he sat at the root of the Bodhi tree for 7 days in one session, sensitive to the bliss of release. Then, with the passing of 7 days, after emerging from that concentration, he surveyed the world with the eye of an awakened one. As he did so, he saw living beings burning with the many fevers and aflame with the many fires born of passion, aversion, and delusion. Then, on realizing the significance of that, he on that occasion exclaimed, "This world is burning, afflicted with contact, or afflicted by contact. It calls disease a self. For however it is conceived, it will always be other than that. Becoming otherwise, the world is attached to becoming, afflicted by becoming, and yet delights in that very becoming. Where there's delight, there is fear. What one fears is suffering. This holy life is lived for the abandoning of becoming. Whatever contemplatives or Brahmins say that liberation from becoming is by means of becoming, all of them are not released from becoming, I say. And whatever contemplatives or Brahmins say that escape from becoming is by means of non-becoming, all of them have not escaped from becoming, I say. For this suffering comes into play in dependence on every acquisition. Acquisition being a translation of the word upadhi, essentially the 5 aggregates affected by clinging particularly with the sense of self. For this suffering comes into play in dependence on every acquisition. With the ending of all clinging, there's no suffering coming into play. Look at this world. Beings afflicted with thick ignorance are unreleased from passion for what has come to be. All levels of becoming, anywhere, in any way, are inconstant, stressful, subject to change. Seeing this as it's come to be, with right discernment, one abandons craving for becoming and doesn't delight in non-becoming. From the total ending of craving comes fading and cessation without remainder, nibbana. For the monk unbound through lack of clinging, there's no further becoming. He has conquered Mara, won the battle, having gone beyond becomings. So really, I reflect that it's a duty of us. It's our mission as sincere Dhamma practitioners to really reflect on how it is that we continue to roll in these cycles of becoming, and how to unwind from that. To deconstruct that process is the goal of our practice. We take on conventions, certain forms that are useful to that, whether it's the monastic life or the upasaka life or the taking up practicing as a sincere lay practitioner, taking up precepts, practices. Though we take it up as a conscious and clear temporary form of structure, not to cling to, not to hold to, as I am this or I am that, I am a monk, I am an upasaka. we work towards picking up structures and using them, but not holding on to them tightly. The Buddha talks about many different ways, in particular in the role of the monk or the nun, ordained Sangha, taking up, how that kind of taking up of identities happens even in the monastic life. And, as I mentioned just in my own previous existences before becoming a monk, really clear how those kinds of professional roles, identities, family roles, identities, father, mother, those are part of most people's lives growing up. And the monastic life is not immune from that as well. And the Buddha talks about monks who might ordain and coming into the monastic life, say from a wealthy family or a well-to-do, well-off family or an aristocratic family. And then they hold this notion of well, I come from an aristocratic family, or I come from a wealthy family. And the Buddha says if that monk lauds himself for that identification and disparages others, then he is not a true man, is the way this sutta talks about it. Sappurisa, it's the Sappurisa Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, but he's not a true man. Or if he, in the process of monastic training, picks up many of the, say, the ascetic practices, talks about many of the Dhutanga practices that monastics can take up. If a monk picks up the role of being a three-robe wearer or a rag robe wearer, and lauds himself and disparages others who don't do that, that monk is not a true man. Or if he picks up, say, dwelling at the root of a tree, or being an alms food eater only, just eating only on alms food, those practices. Any of those Dhutanga type practices or ascetic practices with the idea of lauding himself and disparaging others, then he's not a true man. If a monk practices and develops the meditation, this example, developing the jhanas, first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, and lauds himself and disparages others, even in subtle ways, even if it's just a subtle internal kind of conceit, then that monk is not a true man. If the monk has a great knowledge of Vinaya, or develops a great knowledge of the actual teachings in the suttas, is able to maybe expound and teach them in very skillful or erudite ways. And if he lauds himself and disparages others in regard to these activities as a monk, then he's not a true man. So you can see that there's plenty of opportunities for monastics to develop this sense of identity, this sense of becoming around even very useful, skillful monastic practices if it's picked up and held in the wrong way, with that kind of self-view. The only true man is one who knows and picks up the teachings of the Dhamma and practices in accordance with Dhamma. When a person does that and does not laud oneself or disparage others, but merely picks up the practice of Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma, then that is the person that is the monk who is a true man. So this holy life is to be lived for the ending of becoming. Non-becoming is also a trap that people can fall into as well. The sense of either in a more gross way, the sense of the doctrine of annihilation, picking up a sense of that at the end of this lifetime there is no more experience to be had. That form of belief in the annihilation doctrine, but also can be picked up in the form of picking up views around non-identification, if one holds into it with clinging. I remember a supporter of the monastery a number of years ago who came for a number of years, a delightful person, coming from a background of different Eastern religious practices, traditions, had a wide appreciation and knowledge, and in her more recent years picked up some of the teachings from Buddhism, from the Buddha, and was really appreciating those and making them in some ways the central part of her practice, but still appreciating and using some of the other traditions and teachings. And I just remember having one conversation with her where I was kind of jovially poking a little bit of fun, saying, well, it seems like you're really getting involved more and more with Buddhist practice and picking up even practicing with the precepts and reflections and meditations. And are you sure you're not becoming a Buddhist? And we had an ease of being able to talk with each other in this kind of a way. And she said, absolutely not. I am not a Buddhist. And she said, I think that it's very important not to identify with anything in terms of a religious practice. So I'm not a Hindu, I'm not a Buddhist. I just do what I do. I just want to be very clear that I am not picking up any kind of identity around this religious practice whatsoever. And I thought about it for a minute, and I said, well, it seems to me like you've really picked up a pretty strong identity about not having an identity. And she was about to protest, and then she stopped, and she said, you're absolutely right. And it was sort of a moment of, it was kind of an epiphany, sort of how one can define oneself very strongly as not having a strong definition of oneself. And so we can watch out for that in our own lives too, in the ways that we do that. I'm not this, I'm not that. I'm not going to identify with that. I'm not going to be part of that. That kind of negation of becoming, that in itself is a form of becoming. Thinking about that line back in the sutta that I read. It's a line that appears in several places in the canon. Paul often refers to it in his teaching. That for however it is conceived, it will always be other than that. That's a very deep contemplation in this contemplation of becoming. I remember when I first heard it, I kind of was thinking more along the lines of the word perceived instead of conceived in that phraseology. And it's, in a way, it applies with a bit of a different meaning, but for however it is perceived, it will always be other than that, and kind of often contemplated along the lines of how we can easily categorize experience or particular people and objectify our experience of the world around us and people around us into comfortable categories that we can then, in a sense, pigeonhole, and helps create a sense of safety and structure and organization, continuity in our lives. But the assumptions that we make, the patterns that we establish in our hearts and minds about ourselves and other people, pretty much are always other than how we perceive it. And that it's a very useful contemplation to see how we create this pattern of living and seeing and experiencing the world to create some semblance of continuity and security. And the conceiving process is really, in a sense, an extension of that perceiving. We just take it further. We create concepts around it, verbiology, no, probably not, some sort of intellectual, mental construct from that pattern of perception, which brings it into a more concretized experience, turning a perception into a concept is part of the process of objectification, really separating out a sense of self and object, subject and object, and solidifying the whole experience even more. And in that case, the phrase of for however it is conceived, it will become otherwise, kind of refers to that experience of the transiency of any created experience, any conception, any conceiving. It will change. It will always change. Our ideas, our beliefs, our structures created in the mind are only good for the moment that we create them. And then immediately with that creation is there change, dissolution, morphing. So this way of conceiving is the root of becoming, is always going to morph into being other than that. And in fact, if you really look at it, that experience of conceiving, construing, it really never was that we conceived, because it's just an added layer of mental entanglement, objectification, that's creating just an abstraction of an actual experience. We love to abstract and create concepts to help hold it in a static place, but it's that much further removed from the actual experience, the contact with just the sensory experiences of living and receiving stimulus from the senses and from the mind. And those pure experiences just in and of themselves get hijacked by our conceptual process in a futile attempt to create comprehensible reality that we can then believe in, act from, talk from, communicate from, and try to live out this manufactured world. So it not only will be other than what we conceive, but it always has been other than what we conceive, the actual true experience. And we just have created a separate reality based on abstraction. So we don't need to do that. The whole process of the mind training is the deconstruction of that process. The gradual relinquishment and letting go of the need to keep on establishing these roles, these identities, these constructs, and to return to more of experiencing the world just as it is, experiencing the body as the body, the mind as the mind, all the various aspects of our experience just as they are. I still get a charge out of a story I heard, an incident that I heard, a conversation. It was Ajahn Sucitto who relayed the story when I first heard it, and I can't remember whether he was relating the stories regarding a conversation that another monk had or that he had with Luangpa Liam, in which the question was, Luangpa Liam, you're the abbot of an international monastery, internationally known monastery. It's a big role. You have a lot of responsibilities. What is it like being the abbot of such a well-known, well-renowned monastery? What is that like? And Luangpa Liam's response was, well, I do my practice in the morning in my kuti, meditation practice. I come out, I do my duties, and after my duties are finished, I go back to my kuti, pick up my practice, pick up the meditation. And if some people want to call that being an abbot, that's their business. So, totally not affected by any definition of being an abbot, what it's like having, all these responsibilities of being well known and being well respected and having lots of roles and duties and responsibilities. The simplicity of that, doing one's practice, doing what needs to be done, and then doing one's practice. It's other people's issues if they want to call it something, attach a label to it. So that's kind of my aspiration, is to start to understand that in a deeper way, and that this opportunity of yet another change of role in the days, weeks, months, years, hopefully to come, just to kind of start furthering the process of deconstructing that form of becoming. Encourage people to reflect on that in their own ways, in their own lives, to pick that up as a theme for contemplation. So I'll leave it there for this evening's reflection.